Hello everyone, good morning. Can anyone please confirm you can hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can
sir.
hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just give a brief intro about myself. So myself Arjun, I have 12 plus years of experience in IT, and since past 8 years I'm working 8 plus years I'm working in the field of data engineering. I'm currently a senior solution architect in one of US based product companies. Okay, so we'll start with the what we'll be going to cover in the course and what are the topics that we'll be touching, attempting, and that are the most important in the current Azure data engineering field. Okay. Yeah. So before we start, basically, what is a data engineer? Data engineer is someone who makes the data available to anyone who needs that data. So we are the people, once you join as a data engineer, we are the people who make sure that data is available to a data analyst, a data scientist, or directly a business user, even a visualization engineer, or any person who asks for the given data. Now, making the data available means it is not just like getting the data from somewhere and then just providing it to a user. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
Okay. So when I say making the data available, it means that the data should be understandable by the consumer, whoever it is, analyst, a visualization engineer, or directly an end user. Okay. So that's what the primary job of a data engineer. Then during that job, then it comes that what kind of tool we are using to make that data available to the concerned person, in what format we are providing the data, whether it's in the same format that is required by the user, or again it requires some operation, and what kind of simplicity we are providing with that data so that a user can use that data to for his dashboards, for his business decision, etc. So that is the primary job of data engineer. So as a data engineer, we should know all about data. We should try to know all about business. I'm not saying it is a necessary thing about the to knowing the business, but yeah. So when you know about the business, when I say business means let's say you are working into a healthcare or a banking project, or you will be part of a let's say a technology project. The more you know about that field, the more it will be helpful to get that data, to transform that data, to understand that data, and it helps you to understand the needs of the customer. So that is what a data engineer does in a day-to-day life. Now, coming to the Azure data engineering field. So those who know, Azure is a cloud service provided by the Microsoft. Now, I'll just quickly touch base about what is cloud and what is on-premises. So it's very simple and basic. So earlier we used to have on-premises system. It means that the company in which we are working has its own infrastructure, either created by the company or any third-party vendors who has that infrastructure. So when I say infrastructure means computing infrastructure that comes with storage, RAM, like processing power,
Hi, sir.
then
Hi,
data
sir.
centers for that matter. Yep, please go ahead.
Sir, can please speak louder? Actually, between low voice. Actually,
Okay, sorry.
people. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Is it better now?
Yeah, yeah. Better now. Better now, please.
Okay, thank you. So if you have any questions in given point of time while I'm sharing or any concerns, you can interrupt me and ask me that questions or whatever concerns you have, you can share me. Okay. Thank
Thank you,
you.
sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ravi. Okay. So coming back to what I was saying is difference between on-premises and cloud. So right now everywhere we see it is hosted into cloud. We are using cloud services to move our data. We are storing our data into cloud. We are using cloud data engineering. So just to clarify what is cloud and what was there earlier, it used to be on premises. It is not that on premises is completely gone, it is still there and it will be continuing to be here. Okay, so main difference between on premises is something that we have to create or bring our own infrastructure into the company, or we hire a third party to have the same infrastructure into the company. For example, storage, then your compute infrastructure, RAM, then again the thing that are required to maintain that as well, data centers or storage room, etc. Everything has to maintain by a company or a third party. It's just like working on your own laptop when in your or sitting in your own room. So you have to buy or rent the laptop, then you start working, then you have to define what is the storage in your laptop, what is the compute of your laptop. That is kind of a on-premises system. And what is cloud is, so all this infrastructure is provided by a company, a third party company. For example, in our case it is Microsoft. As it is hosted by Microsoft, we call it as a Microsoft's cloud, and that is called as Azure. So what does Microsoft do is, Microsoft provides us everything. For example, they provide us compute, they provide us data centers in a secured location. They themselves copies the data whenever we store the data into the Azure. Then they provide the compute which is scalable. So for example, right now my laptop has a 8 GB of RAM, and I need a 16 GB of RAM. So what, suppose I have on-premises infrastructure, what I need to do is, I need to contact my infrastructure team. I need to get approval to increase the RAM to 16 GB. Then that infrastructure guy will go to market, purchase it, or if it has an inventory, it will install that RAM. To install that RAM, again it will shut down the complete infrastructure or the part of infrastructure for a given point of time, and then that way the RAM will be installed. But when it is in cloud, you just click the button, you just give the command that I need to increase the RAM to 16 GB, and that's it. The RAM is increased within 16 GB in a given seconds. Okay, and for that also you don't have to shut down infrastructure, shut down your process. You don't have to do anything that. So that is the advantage of cloud. I hope I'm clear with the what is the difference between cloud and on-premises. So when I said that on-premises was there, is there, and it will going to be there. The reason for that is, on-premises when it comes to security is more secure, because you know where exactly your data is stored. It is not outside your network. So when data is stored into cloud, it is all over the internet. Although it is secure, we can access it using the private endpoints. But yeah, it is not within your network. Okay, so when I say on-premises will be there, it is kind of in a hybrid environment. So there, some part of your infrastructure will be hosted into cloud, and some part of your infrastructure will be hosted into on-premises. Okay, yeah. Now coming to the Azure Data Engineering tools that we are going to learn during the entire course, it's we'll be starting with the storage. Okay. So in Azure infrastructure or Azure Data Engineering tool, the storage that involve are mostly blob storage that we'll be covering here. What is the Azure Data Lake storage that we call as ADLS. Then in that we have Gen 1 and Gen 2 storage. So what is the difference between blob storage, ADLS, Gen 1 and Gen 2 storage? Then how to use that storage for a given specific requirement. So when to use the given storage and why. So just knowing the storage is not enough nowadays for a data engineers. We should be able to justify that why we are using the storage, because whatever the thing that you can do in Gen 2, also you can do in blob storage. And the same thing you can do in blob storage that you can do in Gen 2. So you should know why you are choosing the given storage. Okay. Then apart from that, in storage, we'll be going to learn about Azure Synapse Analytics. So Azure Analytics, earlier it was known as Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So now it is known as Azure Synapse Analytics. Okay. So Azure Synapse Analytics is basically
Excuse
storage
me,
plus
Arjun.
yep.
What is ADLS?
So it's Azure Data Lake Storage. Let me have the full form for you.
Can you increase the font size?
Is it better now?
Little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Yep. So ADLS is basically Azure Data Lake Storage. Okay. Now, what is Azure Synapse Analytics is, it provides both a storage as well as the compute service. Okay, and the advantage of Azure Synapse Analytics is it provides massively parallel processing (MPP). It is a term which comes associated with Azure Synapse Analytics, that is MPP. And then there is one more service which comes associated with Azure Synapse Analytics. It is an optional service. It is called as Polybase service. It is used for faster data transfer between external sources to the Azure SQL Data Warehouse or Azure Synapse Analytics, whichever is convenient for you. You can call it that way. So, yep. So we'll be going to learning the blob storage, ADLS Gen 2, Azure Synapse Analytics in the storage. So Azure Synapse Analytics, again, there are two parts in that. One is serverless pool and then it's dedicated pool. So we're going to learn what is serverless pool, what is dedicated pool, what is the difference between a dedicated pool and serverless pools, which is like which to use in which scenarios, and yep, basically that we'll be covering into the storage part of the course. Any questions in here?
Arjun, can you write the full form of MPP?
Yep. So MPP is massively parallel processing.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if you don't have any other questions, we'll move on to the next topic. So once we have a storage, okay, that is what will be acting as a source or destination when you are part of a Azure Data Engineer. So mainly these are the storages that you are going to interact. But apart from that, a data engineer has to bring the data from various sources. You can't say that I can just bring the data from only blob or data lake or synapse only. Okay. So in we interact with multiple storages as a source. So it can have GCP, AWS storage. Okay. It can have on-prem SQL. It can also have cloud SQL. Then sorry, it can have your Excel as a source. It can have flat file as a source. Okay. So these are like, again, there are again many sources, but these are some of the sources that are there which are like commonly used in most of the companies as the data sources to onboard your data. Okay. So the main difference when you onboard data from various sources is just a connection. Okay. So to onboard that data from various sources and then to store it, okay, we'll be using Azure Data Factory, that in all of you might know as a ADF. So traditionally, data engineering is something like extract, transform, and load. You must have mm, you must have heard about SSIS as a tool or data stage as a tool. Okay, so SSIS and data stage were traditionally used to onboard data. Then while onboarding, we used to transform that data. So that's why it was ETL. We use while we used to extract the data from source, then we used to transform it while bringing that data, and then we used to load it into whatever destination we were choosing to load. For example, let's say in our case it's a Synapse Analytics or a blob storage. We used to load that data, but ADF is mainly used as a ELT tool, although it has data flows in it which kind of act as a ETL, but ADF mainly used as a extract load transformation ELT tool. The reason for that is first, nowadays the volume of data is very large. So when you try to onboard that data and then while perform the transformation of data while onboarding the same data, it takes a lot of time. And the transformation that you need to perform, all the transformation might not be supported by the tool. the data factory tool or the data stage tool that you are using, because nowadays the data that we are using is not only in structured format. It can be semi-structured data, it can be unstructured data. So the transformation on the data varies based on what data we are getting and how we need that data into destination. So that is why mainly what we prefer nowadays is we connect to source, we onboard that data into our destination, that is either Blob, Gen2, or Synapse in our case. We store that data there into a staging layer, or what we can call it as a bronze layer in terms of Databricks, and then we perform transformations. We write PySpark script on that, or we can write Python script on that, or we can write a SQL script on that to perform all the operations that we need. And then after that operations, we move it to the next layer that we call as a curated layer or a gold layer. Okay. So in this course, we'll be covering Azure Data Factory version 2. Anyways, version 1 is not used by anyone, which is outdated, and even Microsoft doesn't support version 1 right now. So to give brief idea about what is Azure Data Factory is, it is a cloud-based ELT tool which is used to onboard that data, transform that data, and store that data. So it is codeless tool. So basically it is just a drag and drop. You need to drag the objects, what actions you need to perform. There are objects or in the ADF to perform that actions. We drag that objects, we provide the necessary information in that, so that is what kind of source there is, then what if like basic transformations that we need to do, or before inserting data into our destination, do I need to perform any action before I insert that data. So that kind of basic stuff we provide to that information, and we do that, does the job. So that's why it is a basically a no code or minimum code tool. Even though it acts as a no code tool and we generally like 99% people use it as a no code tool, those who know the coding or those who understand the JSON can use their JSON coding technique to basically create the data vector pipeline. So that feature is also available there. And then just this is an additional information. So you can connect the data factory to Visual Studio as well and use the data factory to create the objects from Visual Studio as well. Okay. So we'll be covering data factory to create some pipelines where we will onboarding the data, we'll be storing the data, and we'll perform some basic transformations in the data factory as well. Okay. Any questions in that? Okay. So going to the next topic before, so I mentioned we'll be covering a storage. In storage, we'll be covering blob storage, data lake storage, and a synapse. So apart from the difference between the computing or storage technique that they use, there is one more basic difference between these storages. Okay. In Synapse Analytics, only the structured data is stored. You can store the semi-structured data, but that will be again in the form of structured data. Blob storage and data lake Gen 1 and Gen 2 storage support structured data, semi-structured data, and unstructured data. So that is the most basic difference between these storages. Okay. Okay. So during this course, while working on to the Synapse Analytics, will
Arjun,
be,
sorry to interrupt you.
yep.
Uh, as you're talking about the storage structure, and you're saying the unstructured data as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, what is that unstructured data?
Okay. So to in a simple term, basically whatever that doesn't follow any specific rule or a structure is unstructured data. I can explain you with the example, so that will be better.
Yeah.
So see, uh, mm, so structured data is basically have a dedicated or have a mm, predefined format which the data follows. For example, a table. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
in table we have given set of columns, so data doesn't exceed out of that columns, and in
Mm-hmm.
inside that also in the given columns the data follows a certain length. Suppose if I define a column which has a length of 500 characters, the data within that column stays within the 500 characters. If it is go out of that, the it gives error, not the table, but whenever I'm trying to insert data within that table, which is larger than 500 characters, it gives error. Okay, so basically table is the perfect example of the structured data. Coming to semi-structured data. Okay, so semi-structured data doesn't have a definite structure, but it follows certain rules. For example, a JSON. Okay, a JSON format doesn't have a definite structure. Okay, it can vary, but it follows a certain format. It means it is a key value pair. So there will be always a key and there will be always a value to that. Okay, so that's why it comes under semi-structured data. And when I say unstructured data, it doesn't have any structure. For example, the data gathered from any kind of forms. Okay, so let's say you all of you are using Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any whenever uh, we use any internet service, right? Generally we get the feedback thing, right? We need to provide the feedbacks, and then there is a comment section in that feedback that once we fill the form, there is a comments that we need to put. So when we put the comment, there is no structure to that. You can write anything. You can use code, single quote, double quotes, or any special characters. Or even when you use Twitter or Facebook, you can post images. You can then post your graffiti. You can write text also. So when I'm gathering the data from, let's say, a user's comment, I can get images, I can get graffitis, I can get a table also if you post a table, and I can get comments also. So that particular section doesn't, it's not following any kind of structure. So that is completely an unstructured data.
Okay.
Okay, I hope you are clear on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so yes, so while covering to Azure Synapse Analytics, we'll be covering to SQL programming as well. So SQL is not a programming language, pardon me about that. So SQL is a scripting language. Okay, it used to script the data from database in which it is stored. Okay, so we'll be covering T-SQL, transactional SQL, or the SQL which is most popularly used into the Azure databases. So there is again we have MySQL, then we have yep MySQL. So which is again the second most used language. So the difference between T-SQL and MySQL is like only 1%, where some of the syntax and commands varies. So if you know either of these, you can work in any of this language. Okay. So just to give idea, when I started into MySQL for like 1 year, and then I just moved to T-SQL, and it doesn't take any efforts to move from MySQL to T-SQL or T-SQL to MySQL. That's it about this. So we'll be covering the SQL scripting language as well when we will be working on the Synapse Analytics, as well as when we'll be working on the Databricks. So when we use SQL in Databricks, it is called as Spark SQL. So we'll go to that point later on. Just to touch base, it is called as Spark SQL. Okay.
So, Arjun, we will not be using PySpark and Python.
No, yes, yeah. We'll be using PySpark and Python as well. So I was just coming to that point. So apart from the storage, and then I mentioned about Azure Synapse Analytics to process the data, we have one more tool that is commonly used, which is called as Databricks. So Databricks is a company, and the Databricks is a tool provided by that company to basically read the data, then read the data from various sources, write the data from to various sources, and transform that data into required format, like whatever transformations you has you can do in Databricks. Okay, so Databricks support currently PySpark, Spark SQL, then your Scala and R. These four languages are supported by Databricks, and we'll be using PySpark and Spark SQL for our data engineering work, what that we are going to perform during this course. Okay, so the main difference between Databricks and Synapse Analytics is, so Databricks is basically, as I mentioned, it supports various languages, and Synapse Analytics currently supports SQL only. But in Synapse, we have a part where if you use a dedicated pool, we get a Spark functionality to use, and there you can use PySpark as well. But the UI is not as user friendly as Databricks. That why if you have major operations in Spark or Python, you need to perform. You have complex operation. You are always dealing with semi-structured data. Then we prefer Databricks over the Synapse Analytics dedicated pool. Okay. Now what is PySpark? So before covering these languages or before writing the code in these languages, we'll be getting familiar with Databricks UI. Okay, we'll be covering what is Databricks, what are the cluster, types of cluster, how to connect Databricks with the blob storage or Gen2 storage, how to write data to blob storage or Gen2 storage. Okay, that part we'll be covering. Then we'll be covering the transformation using PySpark and Spark SQL. Okay, then also we'll be covering during that what are the data frames, what are RDD, how to convert a data frame from one type to another, how to read the data into data frame, how to write a particular data frame, how to pick a given specific value out of that data frame. All those part we'll be covering during this. Okay, now coming back to PySpark again. So PySpark is nothing but Python we are running on the Spark. So Spark is an infrastructure which is provided to for large data computation. Okay, it is provided by the Apache. So when we run Python on Spark, it is called as PySpark. So if you know Python already, then it will be very easier for you to write the code in PySpark. Because again, it's just the same difference as what is in T-SQL and MySQL. Everything is same, only uh, like 1% of syntax or naming conventions varies, but it follows the same indentation. It has same commands. It can use all the libraries that are there for Python, like that. So that is about PySpark. And what is Spark SQL? It is again same. When I run a SQL language code into Spark, it is called as Spark SQL. And it is not necessary that so Databricks comes under notebook. Okay, if you have seen the SQL window or SSMS window, we have a query window. Okay, and we write the code into a query window. But in Databricks, we write the code into notebooks, and in a given notebook, we can write the code into multiple commands, or you can write the code into same command as well. But Databricks has a very good feature where in a same notebook, you can write the code in Spark SQL as well as PySpark. You can just shift between these two languages as per your convenience. So sometimes when there are straightforward transformations and we don't need to use Python or Python libraries, even if you are not aware of that, but you know how to do that into a SQL, you can just write the code into SQL and that's it. And if you need that, okay, my 90% of code is in SQL, but there is one operation which has to be performed into PySpark because it is very complicated in SQL, and there is an easy library available in Python, and that I need to use. So yeah, you can write your 90% of your code into SQL in the same notebook, and remaining 10% you can write into the PySpark. And you can use the output of the whatever SQL code you had earlier into the next following PySpark code. So that is, I see a very good advantage in Databricks. Okay. Um, Scala and R. So R is mostly, not mostly, basically used by a data scientist, and Scala is used by data engineers. Scala is used by data scientists as well. And in Databricks, we generally use Scala when we need to configure something. Okay, when I say configure means if I'm creating a mounting points, if I'm checking the mounting points, if I'm listing something, the Scala commands are very easy to do that. But if you're if proficient in Python, you can do the same thing using PySpark as well. Okay. Any questions on this?
So Arjun, one question is there. In ASA also we can use PySpark. So it is not relevant to use the PySpark in ASA.
Sorry, what did you say? ASU?
ASA, Azure Synapse Analytics. In Azure Synapse
Oh,
Analytics,
okay,
PySpark we
okay.
can use. So it is not relevant to use that question.
No, that is not the case. So see, it's based on the usage. Okay, even though Azure Synapse Analytics supports PySpark, okay, but to get to use that PySpark, you need to have a dedicated pool setup. That is one thing. That is a prerequisite. Until unless dedicated pool is set up, you can't use PySpark. That is one thing. And second thing, the UI is not that friendly. Okay, it is. So when we try to go to use a PySpark, it is like we are working. Uh, what can I say? Okay, it is like playing a HD video on a Nokia 933 mobile phone. It is like that. So that kind of UI it has is, but it does the job. They are getting there. But right now, the dedicated pool environment, PySpark environment, it's not as friendly as Databricks environment. That's what I can say.
Okay.
Um, is I think am I answered your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, apart from the languages feature and everything, okay, there is one more feature or there is one more advantage using Databricks. Okay. So Databricks supports the Delta Lake, a storage format. It's a open storage format basically. So where we store the data into Delta format. Okay. So what is Delta format is, let me just mention here. You must have heard the .csv file. So CSV is a format. Then there is a Parkway, and there is a ORC, then there is Avro. Okay, so these are kind of data storage format. Okay, and then there is a delta format. So delta format is nothing but the extension of Parkway format. So your data is ultimately stored into Parkway format only, but along with that there is one more folder, and folder is kind of generated where it makes it special. It converts into a delta format. The advantage of delta format is data is very compressed. That is one thing. And then you can perform all the operations that you can perform on a SQL table. Okay, that you can perform update operation, you can perform insert operation, you can perform delete operation. All those operations that you used to perform into SQL table, now that you can perform on a table which is created using a file. Okay, and is stored into a storage location like blob or gen1, or sorry, not blob or gen1, stored into gen2 storage or any other cloud storage that supports Delta Lake, for example AWS and GCP. Okay, and then there is one more thing that Delta format have is, or a Databricks and Delta format have them within themselves, that is a time travel. Then that is, you can go back in time and you can check what data you had in the given table at given point of time. Okay, so let's say uh, it's just like checking the history. Okay, yep. So all of these points we'll be covering in our course. So we'll be having so when I say along all these points, we'll be covering a practical scenarios where what kind of sources are there, how to connect to that sources. Again, if you have any questions regarding any different sources, I can try to answer that. Uh, so once our course is completed, you'll be getting familiar with how to use blob storage, data lake gen2 storage, the difference between dedicated pool and serverless pool, what is massively parallel processing, what are the polybase properties into Synapse Analytics, how Synapse Analytics different bit from the Azure SQL database and on-premises SQL server. Then you will be uh, getting familiar with Databricks, writing code in PySpark, reading the file, reading the tables, writing the data into tables, converting the data frame in or writing the data frame into Delta format. So all those kind of things will be getting familiar with after the end of the course.
Arjun, I have a couple of questions here.
Yeah, sure.
As you said that you will be showing with T-SQL scripting also. Do you show how do we create a data warehouse, Azure data warehouse?
Yep, sure. So uh, we'll be covering, so we'll be using a trial subscription of Azure where you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to pay anything. It is like
Mm-hmm.
either you can use it for around, I guess, 30 or 35 days. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
exactly the day limit right now, but it has a, or it has a $200 free credit. So we'll be using the trial subscription to create all our Azure resources. There I'll be showing you how to create, if you need, I can show you how to create a Synapse Analytics, how to create a storage account that we can cover. It's it's pretty
But
straightforward.
not data warehouse.
Yeah, so Synapse Analytics is data warehouse basically.
Okay, then what about Databricks?
Yeah, about Databricks, I'll be providing you the like code that we will be using and that you can go through. You can create your own code also. I'll be providing you some sample questions or sample transformations that I encountered till now, and I'll be getting you familiar with some of the major issues or commonly occurring issues into Databricks as well. So there is a Databricks unified environment which we can use for this.
Okay, so basically here, what is the exact difference between Synapse and Databricks,
Okay.
and which one you prefer?
Okay. So Synapse is a service provided by Microsoft. Okay, Azure
Hmm.
Synapse Analytics service provided by Microsoft. Databricks is a service provided by Databricks company. So both are from a different company. That is for the starters. Then now second,
Okay,
Synapse Analytics has its own storage. Azure Synapse Analytics. If you are not opting for dedicated pool, then Synapse has its own storage, just like a traditional SQL server. Okay.
hmm,
When you opt for dedicated pool, you opt for this data lake gen 2 as well. Okay,
okay,
coming to Databricks, when you create a Databricks, okay, it gets associated with a storage which is a data lake gen 2 storage. Okay, and then on top of that you can integrate with any other data lake gen 2 storage or AWS or GCP storage. So basically Databricks is just a compute environment. You need to get associated with the storage by default. It doesn't comes with a storage, even though when you create a Databricks, there it comes with a storage, but it is not provided by Databricks. Okay, so it is
Uh,
from
so,
either
so,
a,
so,
yeah.
so what is the UI UX tool where we can do the Databricks stuff like write PySpark or Spark, Scala, or such kind of languages in Databricks whenever we say we need to have a source, right? So when we take the source into Databricks, so where that source will be stored, whether it will be stored in Gen2 or whether that stores in a different storage location.
Okay, so when we are reading, so first of all, answering to question UI kind of thing. So Databricks has its own UI where once you download a Databricks, you will have a Databricks own UI. There you can write the code. That
Okay,
is the first option. Second option is you can write the code into your local Python environment as well. Okay, or in, for that matter, in Notepad also. Okay, you can write the Python code in Notepad or in Notepad plus plus. You can store it the file as a dot ipython or dot python file. You can import that into Databricks environment and just execute that. That is the second option. Okay, so that
okay,
is coming to environment or the coding UI that Databricks offers. Coming to your second question, the storage, where the data is stored when we onboard data. So that is up to us. So as I mentioned, when we create Databricks, there is a storage associated with it. Okay, so generally we provide blob storage or Gen2 storage. So data by default, if when we do not mention any kind of storage, data gets stored into that storage. Okay, but there is a there is an option to provide the store, where do we want to store the data. That is either into a separate Gen2 or a separate AWS or a separate GCP. Okay.
When we talk about the storage, as you've written, blob storage and Gen 2,
hmm
what is the difference here?
Okay, so that I wanted to cover into our course, but yeah, I can answer your question right now.
Well, just you
So
can
the
give me an overview.
yeah, sure, no problem. So blob storage is basically what how can I say? Okay, blob storage. The full form is binary large object. Okay, and ADLS is Azure Data Lake, so that's its full form. So blob storage and the blob storage is basically meant to store the data, nothing else. Store the data. That's it. You just get the data, you just dump it into blob storage. It doesn't matter if it's structured, unstructured, it's image, text, video, it doesn't matter. You just get it and dump it. And when I say dump it, it means you don't need to follow the hierarchy also. Okay, sometimes we are in hurry and we are working on some file and we just save it on download something and we save it on that it stays into our downloads folders in our computer, or something we are saving and we don't have time, we just save it on desktop, right? So consider blob storage as like that only. Okay, it is very cheap first of all. It doesn't have hierarchical structure, so you need to create multiple containers in it. Okay, you can't create folder inside a folder or container inside a container in it. Okay, so that's how a blob storage is. And Gentoo is basically more refined, just like our Windows Storage Explorer. Okay, it it has folders inside a folder. You can create multiple folders there. You can provide access based on folders. In blob storage, you have containers. So once you provide access to the container, whatever inside that container will be visible to that person, but the same is not applicable to data lake storage. Okay, then yeah, that is the main difference between these two.
So we can pick whichever storage we require based on the requirement.
Yes, correct, that's absolutely correct.
Okay. Now coming back to ADF, you said ETL and ELT. Can you scroll a bit
Yes,
down so that you
yeah.
can see? So what is the difference between these two?
So ETL is extract, transform, and load, and ELT is
Yeah.
extract, load, and transform.
But
Okay,
yeah.
so do you want me to explain in terms of data factory or in general is fine?
You just tell me generally, like say if I take SSIS as an integration services,
Mm-hmm.
so it is also called as an ETL tool.
Yes.
So if you take any other ETL tool like PDI, and
Mm-hmm.
if I now talk about Azure Data Factory, what is the
Mm-hmm.
difference here?
Okay, so in SSIS, if you see, there are a lot of transformations. Okay, lot
Right.
of transformation that we can do while we bring the data. Okay,
Hmm.
so generally when we were using SSIS, and right now also sometimes we use SSIS in many projects. So used to connect to source. We then whatever transformations we need to perform, like that is SCD1, 2, or any
Mm.
column conversions or additional columns adding, or like joining, etc. We used to perform while onboarding the data itself. Okay, and then we used to store the final converted data into a SQL database or anywhere that we wanted to store. That is the main purpose of that ETL and SSIS transformation packages. But when it comes to data factory, in data factory, data flows supports some of the transformation that are there in SSIS, or like 70%. And without data flows, there are some transformation that we can do. But when it comes to complex transformations, data factory takes time. So it is recommended that you first extract that data, load that data into the whatever environment as a destination that you are using, because data factory is a cloud-based tool which is meant for the uh, handling the large amount of data. So we load that data first into, let's say, our Synapse or a storage, and then we perform the transformations. So the time consumed for the transformation while onboarding data minimizes, and we can do the transformations freely, because data factory doesn't have all kind of transformations that are required for the data that we are receiving nowadays, or for that matter SSS as well.
Then if that is the case, then what is the advantage of ADF if it doesn't have?
Yeah. So the advantage of ADF is it has vast number of connectors. So you can connect to n number of sources using data factory and onboard that data.
That's right, but it cannot be having all the transformations, right? As you said.
Yes, correct. But you cannot
So
bring the data from all the sources using just Synapse or just Databricks, right?
okay, say if I want to transfer from one data warehouse to another data warehouse, can I use ADF?
Yes, you can.
Because say for example, if I'm using integration services, I can use any of the source and then transfer into my data warehouse. And in the same way, I can use a data warehouse like SSIS and then transfer into Snowflakes.
Yeah, same thing you can do using Data Factory as well.
But here, when you say that there are not many transformations in
Yeah,
ADF.
so it's comparative terms with the SSIS. Okay, ADF supports transformations. We can do transformations ADF. You can call the Databricks notebook or Python notebook, or for that matter, your um, activities which are there for web also in ADF. But ADF is meant for extract, load, and transformation. So when you write 1,000 lines of script and you try to do the transformation into ADF using the SQL query writing window, it will take
Mhm.
more time compared to what you can do directly into SQL.
Okay. So then in such kind of scenarios, we'll be using Synapse or Databricks, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what else will be covered in data engineering apart from these?
So I think these are the pretty much topic that we'll be covering into this course.
So you'll be showing about the resource also, resource governance or RG, what we call it in Azure.
Um, so like when you say resource governance, you mean how to create resources or how to manage those resources?
Because whenever you want to create a storage, you need to have a resource, right? You need to
Yeah,
create
that
the first
is,
RG and then start creating the storage.
yes. So
Without
storage
creating
is
a
a resource
RG,
basically. Yep. So basically, storage service is a resource inside a RC and RG, and resource group is somewhere where we group all those resources inside a particular group. So that's what it's called as a resource group.
okay, okay.
Yep.
And you will be showing about installing the softwares in Azure, or like say creating a virtual machine, or creating installing the softwares in the virtual machine, something like that as well.
Yeah. So whatever the softwares which are required during our course, that I'll be showing you how to get it from Azure, or if that for that matter we need SSMS when
Mhm.
we are dealing with on-premises, or even to write the queries as well, we can do it on Azure itself, where we have our
Uh,
feasibility to write the query.
instead of
But
instead of instead of using SSMS, can we use like MySQL or PostgreSQL?
as we are dealing with the Azure sources like Azure Synapse Analytics, we'll be using SSMS
No, like if I want to use MySQL or PostgreSQL, can I use it?
for connecting to Azure Synapse Analytics.
See, my source is in MySQL and my source is in PostgreSQL.
Yeah, if your source is in MySQL and your source is in PostgreSQL, then you can use those tools.
Okay. So I can install those tools using Azure itself in a virtual machine.
You can install that into a virtual machine. I'm not sure about the question using Azure. Do you want to use the Azure portal to download those tools? Is that what you're asking?
See, whenever we create a virtual machine in Azure,
Mm-hmm.
I want to go and install my own softwares in that particular virtual machine,
Yes, you can
like
do that.
say PostgreSQL, or because PostgreSQL is free of cost, or MySQL is free of cost, need not to pay. So in that way,
Yes,
I
you can
can
do that.
reduce my payment to the Azure data Azure. So. In that way, I can use of free sources or open source tools as my database and as my data warehouse.
Yeah, once you create a virtual machine, it's up to you how to use that virtual machine.
Okay. So you will be showing all this, or like how?
So I'm not covering PostgreSQL and MySQL. I'll be covering the tools that are required here. I'll be covering SSMS, how to download and install that SSMS. I will be covering how to download and install the Storage Explorer,
Uh,
and I'll be covering the same thing that we can access using the uh, Azure portal, like how to access Storage Explorer in the Azure portal.
so you will not be showing anything which is there in a different database like MySQL or PostgreSQL.
No, I won't be covering the installation part of my
I'm
SQL or
not talking about
PostgreSQL.
installation. I'm not talking about the installation. Say you
Mm-hmm.
have your database in PostgreSQL,
Mm-hmm.
and then that database you want to move it to a cloud.
Okay.
Will you be showing that, or like no?
The process of moving database from PostgreSQL or MySQL to cloud is similar to what if the database is hosted into Azure SQL database as well. Only the connections are different. So
Okay,
if you want to cover me that part, I can cover you.
okay, fine. Thank you. And say one more last question. Sorry, Arjun.
No problem.
Uh, say I have a database in AWS or
hmm
maybe GCP, and then how do I transfer to Azure?
So you want to move your data from your GCP or AWS to the
Azure.
Azure, let's say database or Synapse in Azure. So you can use Data Factory to connect to your GCP or AWS database, and you can move that data to your
So we have
Synapse.
connectors for AWS and GCP in Azure, right? The
Yes.
source. Okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
That was one hell of a mini interview, I guess. But on the lighter side, Arjun, sorry. Firstly, thanks for conducting the session. I do have a couple of questions.
Yeah, sure.
I am
Go ahead.
trying to make a career change into the data world. I currently work in the security space. Um, I don't know why I want to do this, but let's just say I want to do this. And
Okay.
hence, that is my prerogative for asking these questions. How long is the session going to last? For how many days, I mean?
So the
45
session
days.
is, yeah.
Was that
45 days, Krishna.
okay? Okay, awesome. So will 45 days be comfortable enough to be job ready for someone who is carrying experience?
Is that for me or you are asking to Ranjit?
No, it's for you only, Arjun. It's not for me.
Okay. So, okay. So, uh, after 45 days, you understand what is Azure Data Engineering. You'll be able to use the storage. You'll understand when to use what storage. You'll be able to write the SQL, PySpark code to read the data, write the data. You will be understanding what is Databricks, what is difference between Synapse Analytics and Databricks. Yeah. So you will be able to get into data engineering field with the experience. But see, when I say experience, so uh, to be honest and to be practical, when you say experience, it also matters the questions that are asked based on your experience. So for a 3 years experience, the questions asked are different. For 8 years experience, the question asked are different. So how much experience you show when you try to go for a data engineering interview, that depends. Because with experience, you face many scenarios that are like specific to your project or specific that only you have faced. You handle many kind of sources. So that's what the experience does here. So, but to as you are shifting your career from your security domain to a data engineering domain, I'm pretty sure you can shift that with this course.
Awesome. So will you also be guiding in terms of how to crack the interviews, along with helping with the resume space?
Uh, so I can provide you with the common questions that have been asked in the interview that anyhow will be covering, when I will be covering the topic, I'll be covering those things, that this is the part where you'll be asked the questions, or this is the thing that you need to remember, or this is the concept which is differentiate these two things, that I'll be covering while teaching the topic or covering that course. And coming to CVs, sure, I can provide you assistance based on the experience, what your CV looks like, or what topics you should be covering.
Great. Thanks for that. And one final question from me would be, since I'm, however, investing time and energy between data engineering and data science, what is your recommendation for someone who's trying to make this career switch, also considering the scope of opportunities in today's market?
Arjun, can I answer this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So data engineering is totally different and data scientist is totally different. When you're going with the data engineering part, what I know is you are simply the task will be moving the data from one location to another location. Just say from on premises to the cloud. That is what a data engineer. And you'll have some advanced techniques like PySpark, or where you write some engineering methods, what is required as per the situation. But when you go with a data scientist, basically it is a higher end of a data analyst. So what a data analyst will be doing is he'll be analyzing the data. But whereas a data engineering will be doing algorithms, will they'll be writing a code in Python or R, and they will be seeing that in that particular department, whatever the regular problems occur, that will be solved by training and testing the model. That is what a data scientist work is. I hope I'm clear, Krishna.
That makes a lot of sense, Ranjit. Thanks for that. But I'm sorry to ask, by the
No, no,
end
no
of the
problem. I love to
time,
answer.
but but I'm sorry, I did not get your intro. We are told the session will be by Arjun, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, Arjun is a faculty for Azure Data Engineering, and I'm also going with the same class. So that's it, my intro. And I'm working as a data engineering here in New Zealand.
Oh,
And
then I stumbled upon the right LinkedIn page.
because I have experience in data engineering where I use PDI, PostgreSQL, and all the stuff, including SQL Server as well. And I'm a tutor of all these data scientists, data analysts. I'm a tutor in that as well.
Awesome. So Arjun and you both will be conducting this session.
This session will be based on only Arjun, not on me.
Okay, okay. But in general, do you also conduct sessions?
Yeah, yeah, that is my personal take, which will be going with data analyst and data scientist roles.
Interesting. Let me take this offline. Thanks,
Yeah, sure.
Ranjit. Thanks, Arjun.
Okay.
Arjun, one question I have to ask.
Yep.
So, will you be doing any project or like mini project type or some so that we can it can be work in the company which
Yeah, so I was barely able to hear you, but yeah, what I understand is you're asking whether I'll be providing a project or like teaching a project where you that can help you with the companies.
yeah.
Okay. Yep. So when we'll be covering this course, we'll be covering multiple scenarios which are part of different projects. That is one thing. And to have the end-to-end project which you can explain during interviews or in companies, that I will be showing to you, and I'll be guiding you how to do that as well, that so that you can explain it better. But I'm pretty sure at the end of this course you'll be able to explain based on the scenarios to and create your own projects as well. I hope I answer your question, Ketan.
Yeah. So if I like you are saying that if I am will create any project by myself, can connect with you offline or something like that too if I'm getting stuck or something. in between?
You can ask the questions during the session. If you have like a specific question, so we can extend the session for a couple of days for the given topics that you have a doubt or you have a concern about. Uh, During the offline, like after the session, I'm not sure. You can check with the organizers if they are fine. Then yeah,
Oh,
okay.
And Arjun, what is the price for this course?
That you need to check with the organizers. I don't have the details of that.
Okay, thank you.
Arjun, I have a question. Yeah,
Yeah.
am I audible? Yeah, like creation of resources which are required for these Azure data engineering, the complete architecture, will be
Mm-hmm.
created by data engineers or manually, or like any we use any automation like Terraform.
Yeah. Okay. So now it depends on the so where you're working, okay, and how you want to do it. So resources can be created manually. So whatever you can do with automation, you can do it manually. So first comes manual, right? So you can create the resources manually. You can do the automations like Terraform or PowerShell scripts to do that. But here I'll be showing you as live, not it's kind of data engineering class. So I'll be showing you how to create go to portal, how to create the resources. I won't be covering the automation part if you are looking to that. And yeah, I think I answered your question. And so once you join the companies, then again, it depends on which project and which company you're working on. They might have a separate infrastructure team to work on these resources, to create these resources, to manage these resources. Or if you are joining a small team, which is like a startup or a like a you have to know all the things kind of company, then you might have to work on creating the resources and managing them as well.
Yeah,
Is that
got it.
fine?
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
Arjun, I have another question. So will the class will be the same time, or will there be any changes in the schedule?
Yeah, class will be, I think, at in evening, 9 p.m. But you can confirm with the organizers. That's what I can for sure you say about this.
Could you repeat that? Is it 9 p.m. or 9 a.m.?
9 p.m. So as per my information, it will be at 9 p.m. But you can confirm with the organizers again about the timing. Okay.
But here in the weekend class, they said that as 9 a.m. as today.
Yeah. So that is what I again I can answer again the same thing. So based on organizational timing, I can conduct the class. So what I'm told is going to be at 9 p.m. If you have like further questions about the timing details and what will be it will be charged, so you get in touch with the organization and you will have the details.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hello.
Okay.
Hi, Arjun. So I have one quick query. So
Mhm.
will any interview preparation steps be given post the session while completion after 45 days? Will we be given any training to attend the interviews for the Azure Data Engineer?
Uh, okay, to answer your question specifically, there won't be any training or anything at the end of the course for this specifically to give the interview or anything. But during the course, we'll be covering all the topics that are required to get into a field of data engineering, which can be asked on the Azure Data Engineering field. Okay, on particularly on these topics. So that will be covering in the sessions itself.
Okay. And the free trial of Azure will be lasting for 45 days, Arjun, the cloud infrastructure?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I don't remember exact number of days at right now at this instance, but it's more than 30 days. That is for sure that I remember, and it has the $200 credits. So either of one which expires earlier. So that's where the trial period ends. So if you want, just hold on, I can tell you the exact. Yeah, 30 days.
Okay. Thanks, Arjun.
Yep.
So,
Any other
Arjun, I
question?
have a quick question. So, what
Yeah,
is the
Rajan.
importance of Python in the course? I mean, we want to be advanced, or so like, so it's basic knowledge is enough. Or could be any advanced.
So if you are trying to get into a field of data engineering, a basic Python, knowing a basic Python, PySpark, how to read data, write data, and with the transformations, that is enough. But to get to a certain level with certain experience, uh, and to do a more complex transformation, perform programming, and like perform more complex transformation basically, and right now the way that we receive the data is constantly changing. It's more involving from structured to semi-structured, unstructured. So it's good to know the Python.
So one question, Arjun. So,
Mhm.
will you be covering the PySpark and Python like in the course?
Yep. So I'll be covering PySpark, but to get to know the family with PySpark, so there are some basic things that comes from Python only, because Python PySpark is nothing but Python only. So simultaneously, whatever required in that, I'll be covering that.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. If no, then I think we can conclude today's session. Thank you, all of you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Arjun.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Good day
you.
ahead.
Bye.
Thank you.